Brothers and sisters, welcome back to the Behaviour Revolution Scriptures. Hope you're having a nice day and a nice week. We're midweek here between Shabbat and Shabbat. We've got a few more days of work to go. And I'm thoroughly enjoying going through these scriptures with you. It's blowing my mind, the things that Yahusha is showing me, and I hope it's making it easy for you to understand as well. My children have started watching this too, older people, younger people. It's for all generations in the 21st century to make deliverance easy. So it's not a strain, it's not a labor. All right, so last week we kind of started, last video, we started talking about Jacob. And we finished off with him sleeping under the tree and seeing the ladder. Remember the interdimensional ladder? The angels going up and down, the messengers going in and out of the dimensions, and Yahusha at the top. And Yahusha actually made a covenant agreement, blood covenant agreement with Jacob. So he's continuing this whole idea of covenant. It started with perfection, with Adam and Ḥawā, and then the enemy got involved and wrecked everything. And so ever since the garden, through Noah, through Abraham, and Yitzhak, and now Jacob, the covenant is being re-established, reformed from person to person to person, because just as they were having their minds washed, because the world was totally pagan, full of sun worship and idolatry, so just as Yahusha was washing their minds for the next few thousand years with covenants, with the idea of blood and bread and sacrificing and water and purifying and cleansing and overcoming the filthiness that's within us, just as he was teaching them that to prepare them for what he was going to do when he came in the flesh, we today are in the same situation, waiting for him to come. And what do we do while we're waiting? We're preparing ourselves to meet him. So these stories that we're going through are not for us to look and go, oh, what were they eating and what were they wearing and what were they saying, what were they, oh, we better do the same thing. No, because that's all cultural, most of it. The whole idea of scripture is to see how Yahusha feels about things, because it's behavior. To see how he felt about certain behaviors, what he permitted, what he put up with, and most importantly, what he hated, and then what he loved. What behavior does he love? What behavior does he want from us, from his bride? So that's the whole purpose of going through these stories, not to put ourselves into their culture, although we are doing that to learn it, but then to step back out of the time machine and go, okay, I've got to go back to work, got to go back to my family, got to go back to wherever I'm going soon. How am I going to behave what I've just learned? How does Yahusha feel about Jacob and what he's behaved, what he's done so far? He's a little conniving little scammer. And just because the promises were given through Rivka and through Abraham, that he was going to be the 𝔹𝕙𝕚𝕚 over his brother, and there was no excuse for him to take matters into his own hands and scam his brother twice, all right, to take it all for himself. So he's a conniving little scammer, and this is the beginning of his journey. And we've all been conniving little scammers, haven't we? And we've had to have a meeting, an encounter with Yahusha, and a massive flogging in our lives until we decide that that kind of behavior is not worth the pain. Because in the beginning it might be because someone else is telling you and it's their fault. But after a while, when you get taken out into the wilderness within yourself and it's just you and Yahusha, no matter who's around you, this is you and Yahusha. You can't get away with anything. He is the best teacher, preacher, rabbi, comforter, encourager, flogger, discipliner, Mashiach. He is our deliverer. He's the best. You can't get away with anything with Yahusha. And would you want to? Look at those who are getting away with everything out there in the world. What's coming? So we're preparing ourselves, brothers and sisters, just like Yahusha was preparing the people in Scripture for his arrival. He's preparing us for his arrival. That's why we read these things, to get our minds washed. Because the world is screaming at us. The world is screaming at us, you must have this, you must do this, you must go there, you must be part of this movement. You must holiday there and buy this and wear this and look like this and behave like this. And it's screaming at us through every single media. All media outlets are screaming at us of how we should be. And in the midst of it all is Yahusha's soft, gentle voice with these perfect gentlemen, with these scriptures saying, this is how I really feel. don't worry about all that. That's just on its way to destruction. I want to call you out, and this is how I want you to behave. So today we're going to keep walking through this journey with Yaqub, because we started the beginning of his journey last video, where he scammed his brother and his father, and now he's had to run away because his brother wants to kill him. And despite his behavior, Yahusha has chosen him. Yahusha sees something in him and of course knows what's going to happen. So despite Yaqub's behavior, Yahusha's bringing him out now away from his family. He's brought him out. Aren't we supposed to come out? Come out, come out, come out. So he's brought Yaqub out from his family, from away from his mother and his father and his brother, and taking him away into the wilderness, so to speak, to reason with him, to beat him, flog him, train him so that he can become Yisrael and have a name change as well. I'm getting ahead of myself there. So before we go into Yaqub and his journey, I was thinking this morning, I'd mentioned something after this event, and I want to talk about it before so that it's in your minds. Let's go down to here, because I added something down here. Here it is. Something interesting about their mindset that I read about, and I thought, this is interesting. I didn't know that. But I'll read this first. Ever since mankind left the garden, they had worshipped many different deities, believing that each one's power was territorial. Even though Yaqub had met Yahusha, it's still very possible that he thinks there are other deities too. Which is why Yahusha is always reminding him which Elohim he is. He's always saying, I am the Elohim of Abraham and your father Yitzchak, and I am the, he says it to Musha as well, I am the Abraham. He's always introducing himself. And I'm thinking, why didn't you introduce yourself? Are there other Elohims that are appearing in burning? Are there other Elohims that are appearing in such grandiose? Why does he need to clarify which Elohim he is? There's only one. Why is he going to such detail in who he is? Because he thinks there's many Elohim, many deities, because that's the culture that they lived in. And Yahusha hasn't got to the point yet in the plan of dealing with that yet. It's not time to deal with that yet. He's going to deal with that big time in Egypt and show them all what he thinks of the other deities. But for now, he's just permitting their mindsets, and he's coming into Yaqub. But as it says here, Yahusha is always reminding him which Elohim he is. It's very superstitious culture, and Yahusha never asked Yaqub to build any altars while living up with his uncle, which we're about to go to now, because he's in a different territory. But now that he's back in Canaan, which he's not yet, Yahusha's promised land, Yaqub probably believes that Yahusha's power is restricted to this place. Of course, this theory will soon be blown apart in Egypt. So the people back in those times had a deity for everything. If you're going down to the river, you'd talk to the river deity. If you're going into your crops, there's a deity to look after your crops, a deity for this, a deity for that. And so here's a deity of his ancestors, a deity, the Elohim of his grandfather and his father, who's spoken to him and promises to protect him and look after him if he does what he's told. So, and as we saw in the last video, Yaqub made an agreement with him too. I will follow you and I will be obedient to you, and I will offer you tithe and everything. You can be my Elohim and all this stuff between them. But he still probably, that was back in Canaan when he had the ladder experience, the dream, and he spoke to him. So Yaqub and everybody back then thought the deities were territorial. So he's going into a different land now. And we don't hear a lot about Yahusha in the next few chapters to come. It's all about Yaqub and his experiences, growing his family. Why do we hear so much about this family that's growing? Because this family is going to be a very important family. Yaqub's sons are going to become very prominent figures in the next umpteen chapters of scripture, So it's very important, and it's giving us the origin story. The origin story. Superhero origin. So let's go into it, brothers and sisters. I just wanted to mention that to you there, that in his mind, he's been talking to Yahusha, but there's other deities in his opinion. That's what they think. And this bit here, it's pretty clear in this era that geographic locations were closely associated with divine visits from Yahusha. That's why they kept building altars, because they build an altar and this is the place that Yahuwah has spoken to me in. So it was geographical. No other deities are allowed right here because this is this deity's regime. And this was all in the land of Canaan where Abraham had set up all those altars. So it's pretty clear in this era that geographic locations were closely associated with divine visits from Yahusha. And so frequent attempts were made by men to reconnect by going back to the same memorable locations, in this case, Bethel. So they were constantly going back, as I mentioned in other videos, going back to the same locations to try and have a visitation, have a to reconnect with the Creator. And of course today, we are so privileged, so blessed, the divine location is inside us. This is the temple not made with hands. So, and that's us, made up of lively stones. So, his bride. So, we, let's go on, brothers and sisters, back up to where we left off with Jacob's ladder. Where is he? Jacob and his ladder. There it is. He's fallen asleep and he's dreamed about the ladder, which talks about the different dimensions. My children have been watching a creepy show called Stranger Things. It's a Netflix show. All about the dimensions and the upside down dimension, and these creatures come out of the dimension. It's freaky stuff. So Hollywood knows about dimensions. Of course, scientists know too, but they can't find them. They can't find the dimensions. And why is that? Because Yahusha is in control of the dimensions. And only him and his messengers can travel between them. Adam and 𝗂𝙗 used to be able to see into it, but they can't anymore. There's been a rift. And Yahusha connected the dimensions with his blood, and we're going to have amazing bodies one day when we're transformed. Anyway, let's not get carried away. Where did we leave off? So Yaqub has just spoken to Yahusha. Since I'm fleeing my homeland, keep me safe on my path, protect me, feed me bread, I'll make this my moment, I'll give 1/10 to you. So he's just left off speaking to Yahusha, and he's going, leaving the land of Canaan, and let's keep going. After his encounter with Yahusha, Yaqub travelled north for nearly a month on foot, or donkey, whatever he had, 1,000 kilometres, and eventually arrived at a large well of water with 3 flocks of sheep and goats waiting nearby to be watered, because a big heavy stone covered the opening to the well. So picture the scene. He's waiting at a big well of water, which is like a big channel, a big river channel with a big stone in front of it, and they'd lift the stone up and the water would come into the troughs and feed all the animals. But the people would wait for all the animals to arrive before the shepherds moved the big stone and watered them all, because it was heavy. It needed a few men to move it. Then the stone would be rolled back into place. So they didn't just open it and close it, open it and close it. It was such a big stone, it needed several men to move it. So they would wait for a few herds to arrive and then put the effort in, move the stone and feed the water all the flocks. And Yaqub approached some of the men and said, "Hi fellas, where are you from, guys?" "We're from Haran," they said. "Do you know Laban, son of Nahor?" "Yes," they said. "How's he doing? Is he well?" "Yeah, he's great. In fact, here comes his daughter Rachel with their sheep now. Look." And observing the hour, Yaqub said, "Look guys, it's still broad daylight and way too early to start rounding up the animals. Get them all watered and send them back out quickly, eh?" But they said, "The shepherds won't move the stone and let the water through until all the animals are here." So they were waiting for other shepherds to get there, other herds to get there. And while they were still speaking, Rachel arrived with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And since Rachel was actually his cousin, and the sheep were his uncle Laban's, Yaqub went and moved the big stone for her, It usually took a few men to move it, and he watered his uncle's flocks. Showing off his big pecs, I reckon, for his dream girl. Moved this huge stone all by himself. Interesting. So he wasn't going to have her waiting. It's my cousin, my uncle's flocks. I'm family, so I'm going to get in there and water all the sheep. And Yaqub greeted his cousin Raquel, kissing her, which was standard Middle Eastern greeting. And he explained to her who he really was, a cousin on her father's side, the son of her aunt Rebecca. So his mother Rebecca and Laban, her father, brother and sister, which makes them cousins. And he wept loudly, for his journey had been incredibly long, and he was now safe among family again. Because remember, he wasn't a savage wild hunter, outdoorsman. He was an intellectual, an insider. Loved being inside the tents with his mummy and studying and learning and speaking and doing all that sort of thing. And so he was just gone on a journey, travelled for a whole month. And so he was just overwhelmed. He'd been on a rugged safari and he's now among family. And Yahusha has sent him straight to family, like he did Eliezer finding a wife for Yitzchak. First person he ran into was the right person. Yahusha led him right to them. Just like he, straight to family. So he was safe among family now. Raquel went and found her father Laban and told him of Yaqub's arrival. And Laban ran and hugged his nephew, kissing him, and he brought him into their family home. And as they all ate together, and Yaqub filled them in on all the drama and adventure that had just gone down, Laban turned to him and said, "Wow, boy, what a crazy journey you've had. You really are my own flesh and blood. How about that?" He could associate with the gossip and the drama and everything that had gone down with the family in Canaan and all Yaqub's scamming and what had gone down. He could associate, and you're about to see why. Because he was a big scammer himself. So he says, "Wow, boy, what a crazy journey. You're definitely my flesh and blood, aren't you?" So Yaqub marries Leah and Raquel. Woohoo. Now Laban had two daughters, Leah, the older, and Raquel, the younger. Leah was not as attractive as her sister and had no sparkle or glimmer in her eye, which in scripture, when it talks about sparkle in her eye or glimmer in her eye, it's always talking about attractiveness, physical attractiveness. So she was much plainer to look at, while Raquel was absolutely breathtaking with a gorgeous face and body. And after Yaqub had stayed and worked with the family for a month, his uncle Laban said to him, "Let's talk, my boy. It's great having you here, but even though we're family, you shouldn't be working for nothing. It's time I started paying you. So name your price." And Yaqub was head over heels, smitten and in love with Raquel. So he said, "I want to marry Raquel, but I have nothing to give you for her. So let me work here 7 years for Raquel." Remember the bride price? We talked about that a couple of videos ago when Eliezer went and found a bride for Yitzchak. He offered jewelry and riches and great wealth. That was the bride price. You had to pay for a bride. The significance of that today is phenomenal. Yahusha paid for his bride. Anyway, so I want to marry Raquel, but I have nothing to give you for her. So let me work here 7 years for Raquel. I'll work 7 years and you give me Raquel as a wife. Laban said, "That's wonderful. I'd rather give her to you than some other stranger. Okay, 7 years, my boy. Stay and work with us." Gifts and payments given to families for their daughters to be married is a common practice in this part of the world. We went into that. We did that whole marriage, betrothal, understanding from Todd's book a couple of episodes ago, remember? All about the marriage ceremony and time of betrothal. So Yaqub worked the full 7 years so that he could marry Raquel. But he loved her so much that the 7 years only seemed like a few days. And he said to his uncle Laban, "Okay, I've worked for you 7 years now, so please give me your daughter so that I may take her into my tent and have her as my wife. So it's gone 7 years. They haven't consummated, they haven't slept together, no sexual intercourse. He's been respectful. But he's worked 7 years now, and he said, I'd like to take Raquel as my wife now into my tent. So Laban agreed. Laban threw a big banquet, and they all ate and drank into the evening. However, afterwards, instead of presenting Raquel to Yaakov as promised, Laban took Leah instead, as well as her maidservant Zilpah. And in the darkness, Yaakov didn't know, and he slept with Leah, making her his wife. So in the darkness, I mean, he would have taken and presented her to the tent. There was no electricity. There were lights, oil lamps and things, but late into the night when everybody was boozed up and half drunk, he presented the wrong daughter to him on purpose. And in the darkness inside his tent, Yaakov did not know. So they would have had veils over their faces, and how they used to dress back then. Anyway, however it went down, Yaakov did not know, and he slept with Leah, making her his wife. Once you sleep with someone, they're your wife, they're your husband. Once you have sexual intercourse with someone, you are officially married to them as far as Yahusha is concerned. Remember, we're talking about as far as Yahusha is concerned? That is how to get married, commit and consummate. We went into that a couple episodes ago. You don't need grand weddings, you don't need all these formal contracts and all these madness that goes on in the world. Once you sleep with somebody, once you have sexual intercourse with somebody, in Yahusha's mind, you are husband and wife. So that's how Yahusha sees marriage. So where does that leave us in the 21st century? How many husbands and wives do people have when they're out there in the world sleeping with one another and having one-night stands? And read something interesting the other day that a woman carries part of the DNA of every partner she's ever been with within her. That's interesting, isn't it? Makes sense, because when two people come together and consummate, they become one. That's why you often see older people that kind of look similar to each other. Who knows? But that's how Yahusha sees this. So remember, we're washing our minds with Yahusha's instructions, not interested in what the world says. So obviously he was married to Leah now. Yaakov was married to Leah because he consummated with her. He was tricked. And when Yaakov woke up in the morning and saw Leah sleeping next to him, he was furious, and he went to his uncle Laban saying, "What on earth have you done, tricking me like this after I worked 7 years for your daughter Raquel? Now I've married her sister Leah instead. What the hell, man? What the hell? WTF?" And Laban was cunning and shrewd. "Oh, didn't we tell you? It's not our custom here to marry off the younger daughter before the firstborn. Surely you knew that. Don't worry though, we'll give you Raquel too after your bridal week is over, as long as you promise to work another 7 years for me." He's cunning, isn't he? Deceitful. So it mentions the firstborn there. Surely you knew it's not the custom here to marry off the younger daughter before the firstborn. The irony is, look in the turquoise, it's completely ironic given Yaakov's trickery of his own firstborn brother. Yahusha indeed has a sense of humour. He tricked his brother out of being the firstborn, and now he's been tricked in receiving the firstborn daughter. Getting all this? So Yahusha indeed has a sense of humour. And despite being outraged, Yaakov agreed to the terms because he loved Raquel so much and was allured by her beauty. And after the bridal week was over, Laban gave Raquel to him as his wife, and he took her into his tent and slept with her, making her his wife also. So now he's got two wives. What is the bridal week? As Laban says, after the bridal week, you can have Raquel too. but you have to promise to work for me another 7 years, which he promised. The bridal week. Look here in the turquoise. Since a bride and groom had usually not spent any time alone together, because that was a custom, they kind of kept them apart, so there was no temptation or, hanky-panky going on. So since the bride and groom had usually not spent any time alone together before the wedding, it was customary to give them a week alone to be intimate and get to know each other properly before they made any public appearances as a husband and wife. This is the bridal week Laban is referring to. So Jacob cheats his own brother, and then he gets cheated himself, marries Leah, and then he agrees to marry Rachel and work another 7 years. So this was the other interesting thing when I was going through this. We think that this is a young man in his 20s or 30s, don't we? Jacob was around 80 years old. What about this? The other, that was, remember when he cheated his brother out of the birthright? He was about 66 years old. So we've got to add 7 years of work onto that, and then he worked another 7 years. So you don't realise he was so old, do we? So Jacob was around 80 years old, and he stayed and worked another 7 years for his uncle Laban, and had both Leah and Rachel as his wives. But he loved Rachel much more than Leah. So when Yahusha saw how upset and unloved Leah was, he had compassion on her and allowed her to fall pregnant. But Rachel he did not let fall pregnant. And Leah gave birth to a son and named him Reuben. Look, a son. So we're going into, remember we talked about how names mean something? So they gave certain children certain names for a reason, whether it be what they were feeling, or it might have been prophetic, or in this case, look, a son. For she thought to herself, Yahuwah has seen my misery, and now maybe my husband will love me. So because Yahuwah has seen my misery, we've called him Reuben, which means look, a son. Not long after, she fell pregnant again and gave birth to another son, calling him Shimeon, which means one who hears. For she thought, Yahuwah has heard that I am unloved and has given me another son. So his name is one who hears, because Yahuwah has heard that I am unloved. Then a third time, she fell pregnant and had a son, calling him Louis, which means joined or feeling affection, because she was thinking, surely my husband will feel affection for me now, since I have given him 3 wonderful sons. Then she fell pregnant one last time, giving birth to Yehuda, which means praise. And she said, now I praise Yahuwah. So see how the names of the children corresponding with what she was thinking at the time. So Jacob's got 4 children now to Leah. This is the first 4 tribes, the first 4 children. Reuben, Shimeon, Louis, and Yehuda. That Yehuda should be orange, shouldn't it? That's a bit of a, not a typo, a colour row. There's a colour row there. That Yehuda should be orange to go with the other 3. Bilhah's children. While Leah was having child after child, Rachel became very jealous of her sister, because she could not give Jacob any children. Remember that the only source of a woman's self-esteem was connected to her ability to bear children, especially a son. I'm so upset, I just want to die. Will you please just give me a child? She begged Jacob. But he got angry at her behaviour. Am I Yahuwah? Do I have the power to let you fall pregnant? You need to look at yourself here. But Rachel screamed at him, just take my servant Bilhah and have children with her, so I can at least have a family through her. She's a bit spicy and fiery too, this one, isn't she? Just go and have a child with her. Go and have children with the servant girl. So he did. Bilhah became Jacob's servant wife, and after she fell pregnant and had a son, Rachel named him Dan, He judged, it means. For she thought, Yahuwah has let me off the hook and freed me. So Dan means he judged, or judgment. And after judgment, she's been freed. So Yahuwah has let me off the hook and freed me. Then Bilhah gave Yaakov another son, and Rachel called him Naphtali, which means my struggle. For she thought, I have wrestled and struggled with my sister, and I'm winning. That's what she thought, I'm winning. So Yaakov's got a servant wife now, which is kind of like a concubine. It's not as high a status as a blood covenant wife, but it's still permitted in this time. So now he's got, how many? 2 more children with Rachel's servant wife. So he's up to 6 children now. Zilpah's children. And when Leah realized that she was unable to fall pregnant anymore, she gave her maidservant Zilpah to Yaakov for him to marry also. And Zilpah fell pregnant and presented him with a son as well. And Leah laughed, how fortunate am I? And she called him Gad, which means good fortune. Then she fell pregnant again, and the child was called Asher, which means happy. For Leah thought, how blessed am I, and all the other women will celebrate with me. Names, as I mentioned, reflect the nature or event surrounding the child. So what are we up to now? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 children. One day while the wheat harvest was happening, Reuben gathered some Reuben gathered some dudaim melons that were growing out in the field, and he brought them to his mother Leah. So this is Leah's oldest son, Reuben. So they're out in the fields. He grabbed some dudaim melons, mandrake or love apples. That's right, it's written down there. Some people call them mandrake or love apples. So he got some dudaim melons, gave them to his mother Leah. Rachel saw this and didn't want her sister having all the drunken fun. Before we keep going, I should have put this further up here. In the turquoise, dudaim melons, called mandrake or love apples, are a hallucinogen. I can't even say it. Hallucinogenic. No. Drunken fruit. Dudaim melons are a drunk fruit that made people very drunk. Hallucinogenic. That's the word. Hallucinogenic. A dudaim melons called mandrake or love apples are a hallucinogenic fruit that made people very drunk. So that's why it says drunken fun up here, because they were, hallucinogen. Rachel saw this. Rachel saw that Reuben had gathered them and given them to his mother Leah. So Rachel, her sister, saw this and didn't want her sister having all the drunken fun. So she begged her, please give me some of your dudaim melons. But Leah snapped back, it's not enough that you stole my husband. Now you want to take my son's dudaim melons too? Huh? Imagine what went on. Bitch, not enough that you stole my husband, you bitch. Now you want to take my son's husband. Now you want to take my son's dudaim melons too? But Rachel said, I'll let Yaakov sleep with you tonight if you give me some melons. There's lots of typos here, isn't it? That Rachel's supposed to be Rachel. I'll have to go through this again, guys. So you see what's going on here? These sisters are at each other's throats because, Rachel's the favourite wife, and now Leah has some dudaim melons and she wants them. So she's made a deal with her. I'll let Yaakov sleep with you tonight if you give me some melons. So that evening, as Yaakov was coming home from the field, Leah ran out to meet him, saying, you're sleeping with me tonight, darling. Rachel and I have made a deal. So he slept with Leah that night, and Yahusha blessed her with a 5th son. And she called him Yissaschar. My reward. For she thought, Yahuwah has rewarded me for giving my maidservant to my husband. Then she fell pregnant again and called the child Zebulun, which means reward. Thinking, Yahuwah has rewarded me again, now that my husband will respect me. Yahuwah has rewarded me again. Now my husband will respect me, for I've given him 6 sons. I was just looking there. 𝗔𝗧𝗪𝕗 means 𝗔𝗧𝗪𝗗 means my reward, and 𝗪𝗔𝗪 means reward. So she's basically called him reward twice. Anyway, Yahuwah has rewarded me again. Now my husband will respect me, for I've given him 6 sons. Then she finally had a daughter, and they named her Dinah, which means the daughter. And Yahusha remembered Rachel and her sadness, and he answered her requests, allowing her to fall pregnant and give birth to a son. She was so happy and rejoiced, saying, Yahuwah has taken away my shame and allowed me to have a child. And she named him Yusuf, which means may he add. For she said, Yahuwah has added yet another child to my family. So, how many children has he got now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12. 12. Yeah, 12. Yusuf was the 12th one. Yeah, because one of them's a girl, Dinah. So he's got 12 children so far that we know of. So he's got a big family already, hasn't he? For the next few years. So then we're going to go into a very interesting story about the livestock. Streaked, speckled and spotted flocks. And after Rachel had given birth to Yusuf, Yaakov said to his uncle Laban, I want to go home to the land of my father, Yitzchak. Please release me and let me take all of my wives and children, for I have certainly earned them by working all these years for you. He not only worked 7 years for Leah and then 7 years for Rachel, he's been working more years on top of that. And Laban replied, yes, you have served me well, and your Elohim Yahuwah has blessed me, and I've become very wealthy from all of your hard work. I'd really like you to stay though, Yaakov, for we are family. So what is your price? And Yaakov said, look, my uncle, I've worked my fingers to the bone, increasing your livestock and herds, and we both know that you had next to nothing before I came along. But now Yahuwah has blessed you through all of my hard work. But I need to start thinking about my own family now and provide for them. So name your price then, Laban said. Yaakov said, I don't want anything from you except this one thing. I'm going to go and check out all the flocks and take out all the sheep and goats that are streaked, speckled or spotted. Because that's the lesser quality breed having impurities. So if there are streaked ones or speckled ones or spotted ones, whether they be sheep or goats or lesser quality. So he's going to take out the lesser quality ones. I'm going to take all the black sheep too. Give these to me as my wages so I can start providing for my own family. And in the future, when you inspect any of my flocks, you'll see that I've been honest with you because of their colours. But if you find any goats without any streaks, speckles or spots, or any sheep that aren't black, you will know that I have cheated and stole from you. This will keep us honest. Let me do this and I'll keep looking after all of your flocks. So he's making a separation between the flocks. He's taking out all the discoloured ones, streaked, speckled and spotted flocks, and the black sheep, so it'll be recognisable which ones are his and which one are his uncle's. He's still going to look after all of them, but he wants to start building his own little empire. So that's his price for staying. Okay, agreed, Laban said. But, here we go, that night he went out into the pastures and removed all the male and female goats that were streaked, speckled, spotted, or had any white patches, as well as all the black sheep. He gave them to his own sons, who took them on a 3-day journey from where Laban lived. So Yaakov would never know about them. Do you understand that? Yaakov said, I'm going to take out all the discoloured and blemished, streaked, speckled and spotted animals, and they'll be my payment. So Laban's gone into the field that night and taken out all his payment and they've gone on a 3-day journey, so Yaakov won't know about it. He scammed him. He's taken, so he doesn't want to pay him anything. He wants him to stay, he doesn't want to pay him. There's lessons in here about how to treat your employees. Scripture's all about practical behaviour. Be truthful and real with people and pay them what they're due, you know, that sort of thing. Otherwise, you'll see what happens to Laban. And Yaakov continued to live with his uncle, feeding and guarding his flocks, even though he noticed that none of the flocks had any streaks, speckles or spots all of a sudden. You think he was stupid? You think he didn't know that one day there were no discoloured animals anywhere? And there were no black sheep either for his wages. And once again, he knew he'd been cheated by his slimy uncle. So this is funny what happens next. Ancient genetic breeding. So Yaakov cunningly, Yahusha told him how to do this too. Yaakov cunningly took the fresh branches from the poplar, almond and chestnut trees, peeled off the bark, making white streaks on them, and exposed the inner rods. So he took the branches and ripped off the bark, exposing the inner rods of the sticks, the branches. Then he placed these peeled branches in the watering troughs where the flocks of sheep came to drink, for that's where they all mated. So when the goats and sheep and livestock went to the watering troughs, that's where they often mated. And when they mated in front of the white streaked branches, they gave birth to lambs that were streaked, speckled and spotted. So even though the parents weren't streaked, speckled and spotted, because of the branches, this is ancient science really, through this process they produced offspring, calves and babies that were streaked, speckled and spotted. Then Yaakov separated those lambs from Laban's flock, so he was getting his streaked, speckled and spotted wages, see, which had been stolen from him and taken somewhere else. The new livestock was streaked, speckled and spotted. And at mating time, he turned the flock to face Laban's animals that were streaked or black. So then he started interbreeding them. He'd put the speckled ones with Laban's ones so that they would produce speckled ones, and he'd take them as well. So he's constantly, he's getting them from the babies, and he's getting them from, he's very cunning, isn't he? This is how he built his own flock, instead of increasing Laban's. And whenever the stronger females were ready to mate, Yaakov would again place the peeled branches in the watering troughs in front of them. Then they would mate in front of the branches. But he didn't do this with the weaker ones. So the weaker lambs belonged to Laban, and the stronger ones were his. So if you didn't understand any of that process I just explained, just pay attention to that bold sentence there. The weaker lambs became Laban's, and the stronger ones were his. That's what you have to understand. And by doing this for several years, Yaakov himself became very wealthy, with large flocks of sheep and goats, female and male servants, and many camels and donkeys. So Laban's wealth, which was increasing and increasing while Yaakov was working for him, is now decreasing, and Yaakov is becoming wealthier and wealthier and wealthier on the property. So one day, Yaakov heard his cousins, which were Laban's sons, grumbling and complaining about him, saying, Yaakov has scammed our father out of all his wealth, and everything he's got is really from us. So they're not facing their behaviour, they're blaming Yaakov that they're getting poorer and he's getting richer. And he also noticed, apart from this thing with his cousins, he also noticed that his uncle was behaving very differently towards him now, that there had been a shift in the wealth. Some versions say his countenance, his face had dropped, his countenance, he was giving him the cold shoulder. His uncle wasn't impressed with him because there'd been a shift in the wealth. So that night, Yahusha spoke to Yaakov. Here we go, Yahusha's entering the scene now. It's time to go home, my son, back to the land of your father Yitzchak, who still lived in Beersheba. Gather your whole family and go, and remember that I will always be with you. He makes that promise a lot. Remember, I will always be with you. And just as his life was back then, we need to remember that all the time in our life today too. Remember, I will always be with you. No matter what you are going through, I'm orchestrating this, I'm going through this, I'm leading you. I mean, we all know what attacks are, spiritual attacks through people and in our own minds, but the training plan you are on is from Yahusha. So don't think your inconvenience or hardships are from unclean spirits or attacks. They're different. Yahusha is putting you through what he's putting you through to train you, you know, because he wants your attention. He wants you to know that he is always with you and your eyes should be on him. Our eyes have to be on him all the time, in all our dealings, wheelings and dealings and things that we do in the world. Our business and everything. Yahusha wants to be a part of all of it. So Yahusha's just told him, gather your whole family and go. So he can see the mood and the atmosphere in the what's going on with the family and his uncle. And he says, get out of there, it's time. Get out of there. So Ya'qub had a chat with his wives out in the field while they kept an eye on the flocks, just to gauge how they really felt about this big move. And he said to both Rachel and Leah, surely you can both see that your father hates me now, because his own scam has backfired on him. And Yahuwah, the almighty Elohim of my fathers, has been increasing and blessing us all. You both know how hard I've worked for that man over the years, and time after time he has lied, cheated, and changed my wages. But Yahuwah has allowed all this to happen without him harming me. Yahuwah has allowed all this to happen without him harming me. Your father told me that all the speckled animals will be my wages. Then the whole flock began to produce speckled young. Then your father changed his mind and said that all the striped animals will be my wages. Then the whole flock produced striped young. Yahuwah showed me how to take everything from your father because of his dishonest, deceitful behavior. And now he has given everything over to me. Yahuwah also came to me in a dream during the mating season, saying, Ya'qub, can you see that it's only the streaked, speckled and spotted males that are mating with the female of your flock? I have seen the despicable way that your uncle Laban is treating you, and I am the one who appeared to you at Bethel, the place where you anointed the memorial stone and where we raised up a covenant. Now gather your whole family and leave this place. So, once again, Yahuwah is reminding him, I am the one who appeared to you at Bethel. Don't be confused. It's not some other deity, just in case Ya'qub was confused. I am the Elohim who appeared to you at Bethel. Gather your family and leave. And both Rachel, and Leah agreed. That's fine. There's no inheritance for us now from our father anyway. And we have as much influence as a foreign woman does. And after he sold us to you, he squandered all the money you paid him. So the wealth Yahuwah has given you from our father actually belongs to us anyway, and our children. So let's go ahead and do what Yahuwah has told you to do and stop being our father's slaves. What does that mean? A large part of the bride price was supposed to go to the bride, but Laban kept all the money Ya'qub paid him for himself. So when the bride price is paid, it's supposed to go to the bride, to their family. But Laban, slimy little scammer, kept all the money for himself and squandered it. So that's why they've said there's no inheritance for him, from him anyway. So they were really angry at him too. He's a liar, a deceiver, a cheater. Let's go. Stop being our father's slaves. Let's go. Do what Yahuwah has told you. So, we might leave it there, brothers and sisters. That's long enough for this video. And we're going to see what happens on Ya'qub's way home, on his way home back to Canaan. He goes kind of the long way, and he runs into his brother Esau. And also his uncle Laban chases him through the desert as well. So it's all happening. We've got exciting things coming up, brothers and sisters. I hope you got a lot out of that. Remember that Ya'qub is going through a process. He's had all these children now. He's got all these children to provide for, and he's not working for his uncle anymore. He wants to provide for his family, start building his empire. and have his own personal relationship with Yahusha and see what's going to happen. And Yahusha promises, I will be with you. So don't stray from the left or the right, stay on your path, I will be with you. And you can see in this also that Yahusha looks after us. Even though we're in a wicked system, even though we're being cheated and scammed at every point from the system that we're in, paying exorbitant amounts of tax, and it's a wicked, wicked system, being abused and trodden on by everybody around us. You can see that in the midst of it all, Yahusha looks after his bride. Yahusha always makes a way out for his people. So stay strong, brothers and sisters. We've got more exciting things happening with Yahusha next video. Love you guys. Bye-bye.